So welcome everyone to Sex Workers Built the Internet. My name is Livia Foldes, and I'm an artist, designer, and accomplice working in the movement for sex workers' rights. So I'm a co-founder of Decoding Stigma, who's hosting this event, along with, of course, Gabriella Garcia, who is one of our panelists today. We're a collective of people within the Venn diagram of sex work, technology, and research. And we're working to prioritize sexual autonomy as a necessary ethics question for futurists. So our talk today is an oral history roundtable about the criminalized labor and the communal innovation that made the internet what it is today and what it could be in the future. Our panelists are going to speak for about 40 minutes, and then we'll open up the floor for Q&A. You're welcome to use the chat feature throughout to ask questions, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can at the end. So a few thank yous. We are co-hosting this event with Hacking Hustling, who are a collective of sex workers, survivors, and accomplices working at the intersection of tech and social justice to interrupt violence facilitated by technology. And I'm so inspired by their work and really honored to be in community with them today. I'm also so appreciative of the Sex Tech Lab at the New School's School for Public Engagement and its leader, Dr. Pantea Farvid, for supporting and sponsoring this event, which was funded by the Dean's Conference Fund. And special thanks also to Danielle Blunt of Hacking Hustling, Sherry Cohen, the New School's Director of Communications, my wonderful co-organizer, Sarah Epstein, and McKnight, our Zoom moderator. Many of us are Zooming from North America, where we're living on stolen land that is still and always Indigenous land. To learn more about the land you're living on, you can look to the resources provided by the Native Governance Center, which are available at nativegov.org. Okay, so now without further ado, I'm so excited to introduce today's speakers. I'm going to start with Sinnamon Love, who is a 29-year veteran sex worker, community organizer, and Black feminist pornographer living with an acquired brain injury in NYC. Love is a fierce advocate for Black Lives Matter, trans rights, sex workers' rights, and full decriminalization of sex work and cannabis. Sinnamon identifies as a kinky, bisexual, polyamorous grown-up and lifestyle switch. Prior to COVID-19, she worked as a full-service sex worker and professional dominatrix. She's a vibe curator, yogi, hip-hop and house head, orgasmic meditation practitioner, cannabis enthusiast, so happy 420 to all who celebrate, recovering serial monogamist, hashtag naturally gray, and happily hashtag single in Brooklyn. Tina Horn is the creator and writer of the sci-fi sex rebel comic book series SFSX, or Safe Sex. She also hosts and produces the long-running kink podcast, Why Are People Into That? And was the host and co-writer of the Wondery podcast series Operator, which I truly cannot recommend highly enough. Her reporting on sexual subcultures and politics has appeared in Rolling Stone, Playboy, Hazlitt, Glamour, Jezebel, and elsewhere. She's the author of 2 nonfiction books and has contributed to numerous anthologies, including the queer horror collection Theater of Terror, and We Too, essays on sex work and survival, which she also co-edited. Tina has lectured on sex worker politics and queer BDSM identities at universities and community centers all over North America, and works as an on-set consultant for theater, film, and television, including the dominatrix scenes of the amazing show Pose. She's a Lambda Literary Fellow, an AVN nominee, the recipient of 2 Feminist Porn Awards, and holds an MFA in Creative Nonfiction Writing from Sarah Lawrence. Finally, last but very much not least, we have Gabriella Garcia, my amazing co-founder of Decoding Stigma, a cross-institutional working group that calls for the inclusion of sex worker voices in all spaces that purport to be designing the future. She recently completed a postdoctoral fellowship at NYU's Interactive Telecommunication program, where her research focused on the co-history of commercial sex and media technology. She also sits on the Community Advisory Board for Urban Justice Center's Surveillance Technology Oversight Project. So thank you, speakers, so much for being here today. And we're here building on your truly essential work at Trained Texts and Tits, Sex Work, Technology, and Movement, which was a series of classes organized by Hacking Hustling. And we're going to drop a link in the chat to that for anyone who wants to check out the recordings. So in those classes, which went much further back than the internet days that we're going to talk about today, you all really dug into the ways that sex workers have made the internet what it is today. So that was by making it desirable. So enticing people to overcome the hurdles of expensive hardware and clunky software to enter into these new spaces. By making it accessible, so driving demand for faster connection speeds, better webcams and displays, and more democratic and widespread access. And by making it profitable through technical and social innovations, like inventing pop-up ads and accepting payments online. And all of that is incredibly important and something that mainstream internet histories that emphasize a few great men completely leave out of the story. But another thing that I really learned from you all, and a point that I think is so revolutionary for how we talk and think about the internet's history and its future, is that over and over again, from the very beginning, we see that sex workers who by necessity are early adopters are there at the forefront innovating in these new spaces. But at the same time, they're also being forced to deal with new forms of surveillance, of censorship, criminalization, loss of privacy before everyone else, and with the harshest possible consequences. So this event and the bigger research project that it's part of is really an invitation to all of our attendees here, to everyone who designs and builds network technologies, or who studies or teaches about technology, to really listen and learn from the people and the communities who are just intimately familiar with the internet and with its potentials and its perils. Because sex workers are doing and have been doing transformational work to make these spaces for their communities safer. And by extension, that means safer for everyone. So we're here today to kind of model what it looks like in this institutional space that we have through the new school, to center, to celebrate, and lastly, very importantly, to compensate people for sharing their knowledge and their resilience and their creativity around this. So enough from me. I'm going to jump into the slides, and the way it's going to work today is that our speakers are going to respond to some of this image research that I've been pulling up based on all of the broader conversations in this space. So I have learned so much from each of our speakers, and I am so excited to get the chance to go back through this history with you. Like I said, I'm going to show some of the archival image research that I've been doing for this project, but as we all know, the images alone are not going to give us the full story, and I'm going to turn it over to you to talk back to this research. So I want to start with these two slides showing images from the early 90s, which were truly the earliest days of the internet. And this is an ad for a BBS, or bulletin board system. So what were these, and what role did porn play in their development and popularity? And if it's okay, Sinnamon, I'd love to start with you. Were sex workers involved and profiting in these earliest days? And also, how were models dealing with their photographs being shared across these new networks? So I'd love to hear about those questions and anything else that you'd like to bring to the conversation.
Yeah, thank you for, these images are so wild to me, because the thing that's the most, so you have to forgive me, I haven't taken my meds yet this morning, so I'm still packing for my trip. But the thing that is so wild to me about these images is that it is, the images on the right look so much like the early newspaper ads that sex workers would run for in-person sex work out of the back of newspapers. And so like, if you go back and you look at like the Village Voice or the back pages of the New Yorker or the back page, or the newspapers that you would buy out of the back, out of these little red newspaper stands on the corners. This is what the ads looked like, right? Because, pre-internet, that's the only tool we had to use, right? So, what was happening, when people did start to share these images online, for people like me, we weren't even aware of I was not aware of these bulletin boards in the earlier years. They, so I can't really speak to how other people were aware of them, but I personally was not aware of these kinds of bulletin boards. But they're definitely, later on, we would see forums that would pop up, and these BBS boards are definitely the precursor to forums where people were stealing content and dropping them online. So if you think of the lineage of being the BBS board, and then the Yahoo groups, and then website forums, and then tube sites, like that's basically the lineage of how we now have platforms like a Pornhub. So I hopefully somebody else can speak a little bit more to the actual their experience with it.
I absolutely cannot speak to my own experience on it. This is, I was definitely a child in the BBS ages, but I can speak to some of the research and things that I found about BBSs, and how they just basically were like, not only just the intrigue, but like the fiscal reason for people to even start investing in like the infrastructure of the internet. So statistically, let's see, in 1992, there was 45,000 BBSs with 12 million users. By 1996, 5 of the 10 most popular news groups on Usenet were all porn or adult oriented. I think something that's really interesting about this time is that Penthouse magazine actually started sending subscribers modems, 2400 baud modems, so they could access the Penthouse BBSs and Usenet sites, which just like, it's like, you don't get clearer than that, like literally a porn magazine trying to get their physical magazine readers onto the internet for the first time. Ooh, I have one more thing I could add to that. So you also see kind of the precursor of things like tube sites with the BBSs, because the BBSs themselves didn't have the fiscal ability to maintain the servers necessary to allow people, like, unlike, right now, Amazon has like warehouses full of servers. So they would allow users to download 4 bytes of information for every 1 byte that they uploaded. So this is where you start getting like people ripping porn from individual adult content sites or other sites in order to be able to access other people's uploaded porn. Which if I remember, Sinnamon, you talked a little bit in Trains, Texts, and Tits about that sort of transition of finding people that were like taking your content.
Yeah, I did. That wasn't necessarily the BBS era. It was more, it was like late 90s when I started to discover that people were adding, were like ripping my content from my websites. And, before I could even, if I uploaded to like the back end of my website, this was like really early in like 99 when internet security wasn't what it is today, right? So I'd upload content to the back end, and before I could even post it to the website, people would already have it on a forum. And but 99 was very late in the in the kind of piracy era of the internet, because this was post what am I thinking? Napster. This is like post Napster. So, something interesting that you said though, that I was thinking about is how, Penthouse, having their own BBS forum. I mean, prior to the internet, people had mail order. So it's like, that's how individual producers or producers were getting their content to the consumer, is that they would send out these little paper, not big magazines, but like, people, individual producers would create these catalogs of photos of the models who appeared in the magazine, in their content, and with listings of the type of content that they had. So it was basically, they were creating thumbnails in a catalog that they would send out to people, and then they would send in an order form that appeared in the back of the catalog to purchase the video, and they would send the VHS tape out. So being able to, like, today, I still see people like literally digitizing early 93, 94, 95 VHS tapes that I appeared in and uploading it to like imagefap.com. And, like, they're not only digitizing the content, but then screenshotting those images to create galleries of photos that they can upload to the internet. And so, which takes a lot of commitment. Like, if you think about it, like, how much commitment do you have to take your VHS closet of porn and like upload it to the internet for other people to see? And so, but this is kind of what we're talking about. Like, when you talk about people having to upload a gig of content in order to receive 4 gigs of content, I mean, this is basically what they were doing, because we didn't have the technology back then to make it as easy as it is now. Like, I can't imagine what people were doing I would be willing to bet that when I see some of these early 93, 94, 95 videos that I appeared in, that they probably first appeared on someone's BBS server.
Tina, I'm wondering, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that this kind of overlaps with the end of the era that you're talking about in Operator as well. Were you seeing a lot of crossover between early BBS, or were they totally at odds?
First of all, I am just getting over COVID. Ever heard of it? So I am a little phlegmy, so apologies for that. But luckily, because of this wonderful invention of the internet that sex workers created, you guys don't have to experience that phlegminess in person. One of the many benefits. Yeah, Operator, the podcast that I hosted and co-wrote, is about 90s phone sex. And we only kind of get into the early aughts and don't really cover the internet very much on the podcast. But I mean, something that really strikes me about these images is something that was really important for me to include in Operator, and I will like talk about this very briefly, which is myself as a sex worker, and also being like a lifelong fan of porn, and like, or like a lifelong like fan of the industry, and like from a young age being like drawn to like images and stories, both like from the industry and about the industry. And it's fascinating to look at these images also and think about, they remind me of how a lot of early cinema is basically staged like a play, in the sense that you can see how there's like a transition from like one medium you can see the human imagination, both the producers and consumers, trying to wrap their mind around the possibilities that the technology creates. And something else that like looking at these images, it reminds me of like being young and seeing either like in the backs of the like weekly newspapers that Sinnamon was talking about, or even in the early days of the internet, just being so drawn to all of this, like all of this juiciness. I know that the topic of young people being exposed to sexual imagery is like always going to be a controversial part of all of these conversations, and it's oftentimes, in my opinion, a distraction from adults trying to talk about their human rights and their labor rights. But I think that it is also interesting to think about, like there's not just like one category of person that performs adult entertainment and another category of person that consumes it. Like sometimes there's overlap and sometimes we're the same. Anyway, I could go on, but we're only on the first slide.
You know, so I was going to say something that I think is really important to note about this first slide too, is that the image in the upper right hand corner mentions the latest and most exciting online games. And so like the idea of, you know, adult content and gaming as, you know, at the very forefront of the internet was always a thing. And then also to think about these, like, you know, this CompuBase BBS and as well as the Foot BBS, you know, both of them mention chat rooms, which, you know, prior to the internet, we had, you know, phone lines where, you know, you had party lines where you could call in and you could chat with people. And I think it's really interesting that we've come back around to that with Clubhouse and the Moan app, where, you know, it's, you know, I mean, I definitely ran up, you know, $1,000 phone bills on 900 numbers and 976 numbers, talking to, you know, groups of people when I was, you know, in my early years. But this idea of the chat room being a place, you know, having these BBS servers being the place where you could not only see images but you could also chat with people, and you could also have like email access, which today would be, you know, if you think about Facebook in the way that you can post images and video, and you also have a DM feature, which is basically a short you know, form email, as well as these, you know, individual chat rooms, which might be your groups, your Facebook groups. It's the same thing that, you know, was happening back then. And I also think it's really important to note that foot fetish has always been like the highest like downloaded content of, you know, adult content on the internet. If you go on any website, you know, if you go on a Pornhub or you go on, you know, any other tube site, you're going to find, or I Want Clips or whatever, you're going to find that foot fetish is the #1 downloaded adult content of all time. So, you know, to see this foot image is really comical, because it's like, even back then, the foot fetishists made themselves known from the very, very beginning. So.
And it's also like feet is also sort of shorthand or short foot for like, ooh, we're gonna get a little fetishy, we're gonna get a little kinky here. Like we're open, like if we're open to feet, like who knows what else you might discover. And to your point, I think that the thing about technology and adult entertainment that cannot be stressed enough is the role of interactivity. Because like, if you, going back to what I was saying about like watching a movie that is sort of staged like a play, you know, sort of thinking about it in terms of dimensions. If you think of like theater as one dimension, and then cinema as like bringing like another dimension to it in terms of like angles and how far it can go and like what it can portray. And then you think about the other dimension of being able to like interact with the story. And something that, not to get ahead of ourselves, but something that is really important to me personally and really important to my work is also the question of like, what is the, to put it simply, like what is the expectation of emotional labor on sex workers to be present for that interactivity, because when you look at these images, they invoke a time where that interactivity, the potential to call a party line, to call an 800, 900 number, or to enter a forum or like be in a chat room was like almost magical, in the sense that if you think about like someone from hundreds of years ago, like showing up in 2022, that they would think that electricity was magical, right? And nowadays, the expectation and sometimes entitlement for sex workers to be available 24/7 has just changed the dimension of like what we expect from sex workers online, and like also what other economies can pop up so that there are actually like entire teams of people representing one persona on the internet. But we can get into that later. But like at this time, just the idea that that someone could sort of like emerge out of this like mysterious void and like speak back to you was so mind-blowing to people. I think we just can't underestimate that.
Yeah, and before we go on to the next slide, I just want to point out that Visa and MasterCard are listed on 2 of these images as ways that people could pay to sign up for these BBS servers or to use their online shopping or their stores. So I know that we'll get into like MasterCard much later in the conversation, but I just wanted to point that out so that we can, when we circle back, you can remember that people were using Visa and MasterCard as far back for porn as far back as the beginning of the internet.
Eagle eye, that's so,
Yes.
so important.
Really.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, I mean, we can do a part 2. There's no hurry to get through everything. I think let's, take our time. So I'll show a few more things to move us forward a little bit. But again, by all means, this is a place to, talk about what comes up. So jumping ahead to 1995, a few porn stars have started making their way online. For reference to everybody, Google isn't even founded until 1998. So this is still extremely early. So here we have Danny Ash with Danny's Hard Drive, which I was amazed to learn was the most popular website on the entire internet for the first 2 years of its existence. We also have Asia Carrera's homepage here, which came, I think, just a little bit later. And then jumping forward a little bit more.
I want to make a quick comment too here. So, which first of all, I love Asia Carrera. She is a Mensa member and is the most brilliant person I've ever met in my life. But I want to make note of, if you look at the Danny's Hard Drive image where you have the white background, and then you look at Asia's image with the black background, and even the image after that that you went to, right, with all of the pages, right? So one of the things that we learned about the internet, about creating websites, is that you didn't want to have a white background, you wanted to have a black background, because if a presumable husband was watching porn late night in his office, then the white background would glare back at him from the screen, would glare back at him. So you wanted a dark background, a black background. So if the wife walked into the office or walked past the bedroom and the office in the middle of the night, she wouldn't be able to see this glare from the screen of the white background. So there was a switch between creating these very clean looking, websites to creating these darker, creating this black background on the website so that people could actually, could kind of mask what it was that they were looking at.
That's so amazing to learn.
The design philosophy, and also like this page, like pages like this, like everyone at the time you had a website that would have links to all of your, to like partner affiliate links, basically to partner pages, where you would do click-throughs. People could click through their you know, instead of having a links page, because the psychology says that people, if you see a link, people are not going to click on it. So instead, people would use these kinds of, you know, their affiliate links would be, you know, either these moving graphics like you see in the lower right-hand corner, or they would be flashing images as if you were on like 42nd Street in the you know, the 70s and 80s. But it would allow people to have a more dynamic interaction with that, you know, that would potentially get them to click through to see whatever the content is.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Tina, please.
Something that is really striking me looking at the sort of like absorbing the aesthetics of everything that we're looking at is how much in the world of nonfiction, whether it is podcasting or literature or journalism and magazines, or like film and television, especially like sort of the biopic, or like based on a true story kind of film and television, is that gatekeepers, producers, creators, execs like seem comfortable or more comfortable telling stories about sex work. First of all, if it's not told by sex workers, but that's like one hobby horse that I could get on. But looking at this, I'm reminded of how much more people are willing to tell stories about the sex industry when there's a little bit of nostalgia removed. And I think that even Sinnamon's story of this like prototypical like husband, the person that we imagine being a consumer of adult entertainment, like when you describe it in these like sort of throwback terms, it seems kind of like quaint to people. It seems kind of like, oh, whereas telling stories about the way that the sex industry right now, I think like brings up like too immediate of a horniness, or makes people feel like their actual like present desire is exposed. And so like if we can like I think it's an issue. I mean, like there's this show now called Minx that is about like women's porn magazines, and I haven't seen it. I think it's the 70s. But you know, or even Sinnamon mentioned Times Square, right, with the Deuce. Like I think that when there's like a little bit of remove, people feel more comfortable, and I think that that's just something that we need to interrogate, because there's plenty of stories, nonfiction and otherwise, that people are willing to tell about like the world right now. But when it comes to sex work, I think that there's something about this like nostalgia that that I think is problematic, because it's dehumanizing. It like puts the like immediate real life circumstances of the people who are making this at like a little bit of like a, like ironically, like a fantasy remove. That's my rant about that.
Yeah, and also like I just want to point out too that the visible images of women on all of these icons are all white women. And for those that you can see their face and hair, they're also blondes. So from the very early age of the, you know, of the internet, we were already seeing that, you know, the ideal beauty of, you know, the ideal image of beauty was a white blonde woman who, you know, is, you know, from what we can see, has a very, very Eurocentric standard of, you know, fits into a Eurocentric standard of beauty.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because I think, you know, a big part of this particular project is about, you know, because it's coming out of my work in the design and technology program at Parsons. And it's about saying like, this is one of the institutions where this information is most necessary, most needed. And it's been very difficult to get people to engage with that discomfort that even talking about sex, acknowledging desire brings up. And so to your point, Tina, I think that, to be honest, like I have found that, you know, images that do have this like retro aesthetic, like draw people in a little bit more. So I appreciate the chance to kind of interrogate, you know, while it's maybe positive in a gateway sense, that it also is drowning out other stories that are, you know, much more timely.
I do have hope that the conversation catches up really quickly. There's a video that I use in a lot of talks that's it's basically a soft core called How to Have Cyber Sex on the Internet. And when I use it in classrooms, it's from 1996. People are just like, this is a satire. Like, this isn't like, this can't be real. This must be a fake video of like someone making fun of the early internet. But it really goes to show that, you know, it's 1996 is 25 years ago, 26, that the speed of nostalgia is, I mean, the distance of time is not equal to the distance of memory. So I think it's really just like putting those things in parallel really shows, I mean, God, now I can go into like very strange meta theories of just how like Moore's law and also like speeds up our experience of like what we think we can do to intrude other people's spaces and intimacies. And how quickly we were able to forget about how recently sex was the reason why people got on the internet to begin with. It kind of brings me back to what Tina was saying about one of the ads in the earlier slides of like, it didn't only advertise what was available, it advertised like the actual technology that it was supporting. So there's a like really interesting thing that occurs where like, you know, sex work is actually enticing people to learn about technology. Like if I looked at that ad and I didn't even have a modem or whatever, I would be like, okay, so how do I get to that magical space? Like, what is this, you know, what is this that I can actually access and how do I get there?
I love that you point that out, because actually like the goal with this particular work that I'm talking about is like, it's the opposite. It's using technology to entice people to learn about sex work, actually. So I'm glad we can have it both ways. Well, to talk a little bit more about like the firsthand experiences of workers and communities. And this is something that I know for sure Gabby has written and researched extensively. We start to see a huge amount of innovation around technologies of communal safety as more and more people are getting online and the barriers to entry are really lowering. So this is an early one, and then this is from much later, from the blogging era. I think it says 2006. A board where people can speak to each other about points. So I would love to hear from all of you about any memories that this brings up around what workers are doing to keep themselves and the community safe.
Yeah, I'll go first. I definitely used date check early on. I mean, these type before the internet, we were using, you know, if you had before the internet, you know, many indoor workers like myself, you know, had their own screening protocol, and screening could be challenging. People have this idea that it's safer to be able to give their private information to an agency or to a verification company as opposed to an individual. And so, you know, platforms like Date Check would, you know, basically the clients could pay a fee to be verified. So they would provide their name and address and, use their credit card to pay for their verification and their type of work that they were doing and, the company that they worked for. And then this verification company, this like nameless, faceless verification company that nobody knew who it was that was running it, would then run a background check on them to verify that they were exactly who they said they were and presumably were safe to see as a client. And so, sex workers also could pay a fee to be able to access these databases of, verified clients. And so, for myself, I would use these kinds of platforms sometimes, but often found that it was more preferred to screen people myself, because just because someone screens once doesn't mean that they haven't become a raging asshole, right? Or just because someone has even, seen a client before doesn't mean that, since then they've become, an abusive alcoholic, or that they've, that they have other types of issues that they've developed over, time or years. And so these kinds of platforms, on one hand, it provided some sense of, security, like it made it easier to be able to screen people, but at the same time it wasn't fail proof either.
Right. I think this is where you kind of start seeing things, theoretically what's called interpretive flexibility, where up until these sort of communal websites start occurring, it really does still kind of follow the model of like extractive capitalism of, the person who's the gatekeeper of technology is able to profit, and like they can take the opportunity of new technology. So like the porn producer or like the webmaster at the time is able to still extract the labor of sex workers in order to profit, without much changing in sort of labor issues or gender issues. But once this like technology really starts falling into the hands, or being pulled, like just grabbed in by sex workers, you actually start seeing interpretive flexibility of use, moving away from extraction to what does it mean when those who have gendered labor, like sex workers, are actually in power of the places that they can promote their work. And you see communal safety, you see even with click-through links and affiliate links, you see people advertising for each other and, figuring out ways to make sure that there's mutual aid, both in like legal and health instances and safety instances, and most importantly in fiscal realities. So we really do see that kind of like what happens when tech is interpreted by those who have mostly been harmed by it, or just a part of a more extractive history in its usage.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, and I'll make this quick, but that blacklist site that was in the next slide, things like this popped up because sex workers needed a way to be able to share information with one another about who was a bad client. They started off in like public spaces like this blog spot, and then later moved to more private, back channel, forums or listservs or mailing lists and things like that, because we needed to be able to share information about clients who were causing harm to sex workers. And so, these were some of the things that were really, unfortunately, when Backpage was shut down, and when FOSTA SESTA came into place, tools like this really allowed sex workers to be able to work safely. I mean, there was a period in time in Boston where there was like a crew of people who would screen with with sex workers. They would pay deposits. The first person would show up and they would, they would, go through with the booking. And then the sex worker would discover later that the envelope of money was, had 1 or 2 real 20s on top and the rest would be counterfeit. And then later, because, but that person would basically come to see sex workers to basically case their hotel room. And then the last night that the worker was in town, someone else would come supposedly to book an appointment, and the other people would come and they would rob them. And so, but they would use, so these kinds of platforms were really essential so that we could share information about things like that was occurring. And losing these tools really was it caused more harm to our community because we couldn't keep each other as safe as easily.
I think another thing that this really illustrates is that when people think about sex work on the internet, they're likely to think of OnlyFans these days, but specifically like the idea of the sex worker appearing on the internet either through their marketing or through their content or both. And this is really an illustration of the way that the most marginalized sex workers, people who are probably not actually like conducting their transactions or doing a performance facilitated by the internet, are like people who are maybe mostly working in person, had the opportunity to use the internet as a tool of their trade, oftentimes for the things that we've been talking about: community building and skill sharing and safety and like providing support. So I think it's important to recognize all of the different ways that the internet can be used by everyone who falls under the umbrella of this politicized term that we use, sex worker.
That is so true. And like, I come in on that kind of second wave of gentrification of sex work with blogging, which, kind of occurred when I was around 19. And it's because of the sort of the ability to actually see into the life from the perspective of a worker. So there was really a demystification and a humanization of an experience that was also educational. And, I was able to see myself in these people that were working. And it, though like things happened very, very privately and in another, like with a whole other identity, where I didn't have any community in real life at that point in time, it was because of these digital personas that it was even felt safe to consider it as a sort of financial way, and also have this kind of interesting safety net and community of people that I literally never, ever have seen in person. And some people who we've never even spoken. And I think this is really where you kind of start seeing the sort of rapid snowballing of the humanization toward where we are, where literally now, like everybody joined OnlyFans during COVID. Like it starts really with this moment of personal blogging.
There's also this thing that happened, which is this is a potentially a portal into a bigger conversation about online personas, but something that strikes me as interesting about that is that a lot of the time sex workers use the personas that we create to market ourselves to clients as a way of also engaging in community. So like Tina Horn is a name and a persona that I made for myself as like an avatar, if you will, both in person and then that I like sort of use as like, it's like like a machine that I put myself into in order to like navigate the internet. And I don't know. I wonder if anybody else has anything to say about like their relationship to the practice of performing that persona online, and then seeing the world's relationship to the internet change, in the sense that anyone who uses the internet for the most part has a persona that they create out of like the raw material of their personhood in order to engage with the internet. And like, how are we now seeing the way that we engage IRL reflected back from how we are used to navigating the like public space is increasingly digital, both for the reasons of the past 2 years that have to do with like a genuine like desire to like contribute in a positive way to public health, but then also ways that both can create connection and also like facilitate alienation.
I'm quickly just going to go ahead and stop the share. I would love for us to get to maybe 1 or 2 audience questions, but I also don't want to curtail any conversation. So with that, very incredible question, let's just move into the Q&A portion. And yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I know an hour is like never long enough to get into these conversations. But one of the things that I think that I was just thinking about as you were talking, Tina, is how anonymity on the internet allows people to be their real selves, even if that real self is a troll. We see that a lot with these, even within sex worker community, where people can use their anonymous Twitter account that is, to be able to say things that they may not necessarily want clients to know that they're thinking or saying, because it doesn't fit within their brand. I, from the very beginning, my like Sinnamon and then later Sinnamon Love has always been a real representation of who I am as a human being, because you can only pretend to be someone you're not for so long. And, I see people sometimes talk about like, thinking about rebranding, and it's like, but, it's one thing if the rebrand is, because you are changing and growing as a human being, right? It's like at 48 and having spent 29 years in the business, there are some things that just are no longer a part of my brand because it's no longer a part of my life. Like I am, I have 3 adult children and 2 grandchildren, and I'm just not a party girl anymore. Like, so it's like, I'm not interested in being up until, 4 o'clock in the morning at the club and then coming home at 6 a.m. from the afties. Like, so that's not a part of my brand anymore. But it's another thing if the rebrand is because you're getting tired of like playing into the class, playing into class and status in order to attract a certain type of customer. And so, I do see that in both, the way that in-person sex workers, brand online, as well as the way that online workers brand online. It's like, finding that finding that even keel in your in the way that you represent yourself online can definitely be a challenge for some people. I mean, for everyone, because privacy is also an issue, and making sure that you're able to stay safe, and you can protect your loved ones. But and then we see it in, like I said, in the clients as well. Just the way that they're able to engage with us online, both to protect themselves and their jobs, their families, but also to troll and to be able to cause harm. So.
It's so fascinating to me, Sinnamon, when you talk about, and I've heard you talk about it before, the way that being able to be yourself more in your brand has been so liberating, because the thing that is so beautiful about what we do, and I suppose to a certain degree beautiful about what the internet facilitates, is that it makes that possible for you, and I'm sure many other people who do find that liberating. And then, like, the other side of the coin is that I find that like incredibly restricting, because I feel like I don't know, when I do in-person work, I feel like I feel so powerful and in control of how I'm navigating my boundaries around like, who is this like this like vision of this fantasy that you're interacting with, that I'm performing for exactly the amount of money that you're giving me, like, for my time. And then online, I feel like navigating the boundaries around, again, like the raw material of who I am is just so much more challenging for me. So I mean, I think that and that's not to contradict what you're saying at all, like the fact that that whole spectrum of possibility exists is something for us to continue to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have changed like that. I have definitely grown into that. Like it can definitely be liberating to be able to talk about my interest in like hip hop, or the concerts I'm going to, the artists that I follow, has, and then, what, has allowed me to live in a space where, when I show up at the Roots picnic, or I show up at Paid Dues when it was happening, or whatever, it's like fans are excited because they're like, oh my God, like she really is a hip hop head. And at the same time, like, when I was much younger, and I was also like performing class, and the majority of my clients were white men who were twice my age, who had a certain type of job. There wasn't the type of connection that I have with my clients that I see now, who range from 22 because they grew up watching me, to the people who are my age or a little bit older. And it's like, and I see that as I fall more and more into myself, I develop the type of clients who I can actually build a connection with. And also they tend to be mostly Black and brown now, whereas before all my clients and my online subscribers were all white back then. And now even I think I have two white subscribers on my OnlyFans. Like, it's like I've seen that shift in, and also the way that they interact with me is at a level of respect and mutuality that I didn't have before. It's like now it's easier to retrain my subscribers even on how I want them to treat me, because there is a mutuality that I didn't have with people before.
It's so amazing to hear you say that, and also to hear you say that in this forum, because another marketing pressure that is increasingly put on sex workers, and frankly on like corporations who are given more rights as people than people, as we all know, and also like every single individual that has the pressure to have a personal brand, which is then mined for data by those corporations. It is that we like need to perform, we need to figure out how to perform authenticity, right? Don't tell anyone. Breaking news here, but a lot of the like, this is who I really am, this is what really turns me on, this is my real cat, this is where I'm really on vacation right now, like, is like a part of the story that like props up the marketing and consumption like exchange. And again, there's pros and cons to that, because I mean, a major pro is the one that you just listed, that like the more that you are able to like relax and be yourself, the more opportunity there is to connect with the people who like resonate with that. And then the con of that is that you're always on, and that you, I think somebody in the chat said like losing your, like figuring out like what is your relationship to yourself when like everything about yourself is potentially available for consumption, even if the energy that you're putting into it, and this is something that I find, is like maintaining that privacy. Like even if you do feel like you have privacy with like certain parts of your life, it feels like a Sisyphusian task to constantly be like, don't look at this, don't tag me in this, like Tina Horn wasn't there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I agree. You know, there's a slide that we didn't get to where Christian Triple X was, you know, he for a year he blogged every single day, and he actually inspired me to blog every day for a year on MySpace, and which is where I really started to curate my brand in talking about not just my work, but also the things I was doing for pleasure, like concerts and, you know, my personal sex life and things like that. And I agree with you, Tina, like it is hard to, you know, there's a point when I'm like, oh, I should probably take a picture to post. And I'm like, oh, I'm too into the moment to want to have to do that all the time. But that's where, you know, I really appreciate the business of, you know, the influencer, because even if you are doing, you know, even if these are things that you would normally do, it doesn't mean that you have to record it right then. It means, you know, and as sex workers, we've always had this kind of way that we, you know, where it's, you know, you go to a studio or with a friend or whatever, and it's like you shoot a ton of content for the day. I mean, and then you go home. I mean, it's like and Tina, you know this, it's like you go on a porn set and you're shooting 8 scenes. There's 8 scenes being shot in one day to maximize the cost and the location and all of these other things. And I love the way that influencers really do the same thing, where they are, and this is one of those things that I think that people don't even associate with sex work, but the way that influencers will go to a studio to shoot content, or they rent a location. I mean, sex workers have been, you know, in-person workers have been using hotel rooms to shoot content since the dawn of, you know, of Eros and touring. You know, it's like, you know, you book a hotel, you might as well shoot some content and do a webcam show at the same time. Like, you know, so it's like, I like the idea of being able to, somebody said sex workers are the OG content creators. Totally. But to be able to do that, and it's like I'm starting to rethink the way that I work my brand as a creator. And it's like, what things do I do in my day-to-day life, especially as we start to see, it's like, you know, Instagram hounding me to monetize my account because of my follower count, but I can't post anything that's sex related, and I can't do any brand advertising for sex related products. So it's like, how do I monetize my account? And the way that I would have to monetize my account is to use my real life stuff that I'm actually into, and fall into this idea of the influencer and create and craft this kind of content at times when I have time to do it, when I'm not actively engaged with my friends and family, right? It's like, you know, I have no problem with, you know, a couple of, you know, pre-COVID, I shot some video at Lake Holly in Michigan, you know, because it's my favorite childhood lake to go and swim and hang out and whatever. And then, you know, it's like, yeah, I should probably shoot some video because this is a part of who I am, right? You know, it's like, or, you know, I'm going to shoot video of, you know, creating, you know, redoing my childhood bedroom and turning it into an office for my mom. But, you know, it's like, will I post it while I'm sitting there on my neighborhood block? No, I'm going to post it later. Right. So for my privacy, but it is a delicate balance between, you know, living the life that we want to live. You know, it's like, you know, it's, you know, like everybody, it's like chasing the elusive work-life balance. Right. And it's like, but there, you know, it's finding that balance and finding a way to monetize and be true to self while still being able to enjoy, real life shit.
Yeah,
I agree.
it pains me to do this. I'm so sorry. This is a phenomenal conversation. And I see Blunt, thank you so much for pasting in the chat. Another plug for Trains, Texts, and Tits, because you can see these amazing people speaking at much more length about similar topics. I just want, anyone who has to go, of course, please drop off. I'd like to just give each of our speakers one very quick last chance to plug anything that they're working on. Let us know how we can support you, how we can follow you, how we can check out your projects. And thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us. I'm unmuted, so I will go first. You all are amazing. This has been so great. So my name is Tina Horn. Some things that I'll point you to are, I'll just pop right over here and show you that I have a new graphic novel out. The series is Safe Sex, or SFSX, and the latest graphic novel is Terms of Service. Is very much a cyber thriller about sex work. So like sort of science fiction examination of a lot of the things that we were talking about today. Check it out. You can buy it directly from me on my website, or buy it wherever fine books and comic books are sold, or taken out from your library. And Operator is a podcast limited series that I hosted and co-wrote that is from the Wondery network. It's available wherever you pod. My podcast is called Why Are People Into That? And it's an exploration of sexuality and fetishes. It's very sex work forward and slut forward and kinky forward. So I think y'all will like that. And I don't know, I do a bunch of other stuff, and you can find out more on tinahorn.net or by following me on Twitter and Instagram. Is it me? How much of it is me? You'll find out at Tina Horn's ass.
Gabriella, can I call on you next?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Gabriella. You can follow me. I'm sorry, I'm having a lozenge because I too am very phlegmy today. At Stabriella, Stabriella, on Twitter and Instagram. I also have other personas that are floating out there. If you happen to find me, treat me differently. Don't treat me differently, actually. Treat me as a good civilian. I am co-founder of Decoding Stigma with Livia, and all of our handles are at Decoding Stigma there. I'm very much looking forward to Liv's interpretation of this research into an accessible platform, because I am so sick of starting every conversation with answering the question, like, why should I care? Or like, why do you care about sex workers as a technologist? So I'm really looking forward to being able to be like, check out this website and then come back to me and we can talk about it from there. Otherwise, I think we have some stuff cooking, both in the digital atmosphere. I have a couple of essays coming out later this year in the dead tree format. For some reason, it seems to be attractive for people to ask me to write about technology in books. I will be able to link to that. You can follow our Substack, which is where we talk about all the events that we do, or Twitter and Instagram. And I will hand it off to Sinnamon.
Yes, I dropped a couple links in the chat. You can, I am the founder of the BIPOC Collective. We were founded during COVID, during lockdown, because we're still in the middle of COVID, but we were founded during lockdown to help bridge the wage gap and provide, for Black and Brown and Indigenous people of color in the business. We provide financial assistance, educational resources, and mental health and wellness resources for sex workers. We offer a weekly support group. We are always looking for donations. I dropped that Mighty Cause link in the chat for your recurring tax deductible donation. And we are actually in the early stages of setting up a domestic violence program, and we definitely could use the additional resources to do that. The majority of domestic violence programs in this country are also anti-trafficking organizations, which makes it not a safe space for sex workers to be able to access assistance in escaping violence, whether it is domestic violence or intimate partner violence. This is an ongoing project that will take about 3 years for us to actually put this together. And we need to be able to actually run the organization while simultaneously working on this project. So if you're interested in donating, no matter how big or how small, we have a constant flow of people who are looking to learn more about how to make money online, how to be able to safely do sex work, so that's what we're doing. This month, we are launching our, May 1st, we're launching our a therapy program where we're going to be providing one-to-one therapy, thanks to the Sex Worker Giving Circle at Third Wave Fund. So we are offering the first, we have 10 people that we've already selected to be able to offer, 10 weeks of one-to-one therapy. So we're super, super, super excited about that. And so that's what I'm doing with that. Those links are in the chat. You can find out all of my sex work links are at singleinbrooklyn.com. And on, I think, May 1st, I'm going to be speaking at the Sex Work Survival Guide Summit, which is a career summit where you can listen to a ton of different people talk about sex work and all the things that you need to stay safe. Super excited to do that. I forgot to drop that in the chat, so we'll drop it in there shortly. And lastly, I will be at MoCA LA on International Whores Day with Tina Horn on June 2nd. And we are going to be talking about visibility. So that link is also in the chat, I think. Yeah, I think so. So be sure. If it's not, I'll drop it in there now. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we will.
And I did want to, one more thing. I did want to say that it is, as a Black feminist pornographer, it is an absolute pleasure to be able to be at the New School and follow in the footsteps of Bell Hooks and so many other amazing Black feminist leaders. And I just wanted to say thank you so much for having me. And hopefully I can be on the stage soon and cry. So thanks again.
Oh my gosh, yeah, thank you all so much. So we will save the chat and we will share out to all of our attendees the video, which we'll be posting online, and we'll include all of those links with it too, in case anyone didn't get a chance to transcribe them. All right, I'm sadly gonna have to wrap it up, but we're hearing everyone loud and clear that there's a lot more space to keep this conversation going. All right, thank you so much, everyone. Goodbye.
Thank you, bye.